He said he wants to get rid of Canada and make it the 51st state of the United States. Trump has stated he will be expanding tariffs onto the EU. Really? Let's speak to Erol Morkoc. He's a Republican strategist and spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Good morning, Erol. He's not serious about just making Canada disappear, is he?
No, I think it's a little bit facetious, and it's a little bit to prod at Justin Trudeau. If you can imagine, Donald Trump isn't a big fan of Justin Trudeau, and when he looks at Canadian businesses and Canadian trade deficit that we have with Canadian businesses, he feels an obligation to protect the U.S. worker. When he looks at the fact that Canada only spends 1.5% of its allotted GDP towards NATO, he sees that to be a failing on Canada's part. So he's jokingly, effectively saying, we're subsidizing your economy. What makes you different from being a state? If you want to be a sovereign country, you shouldn't be dependent on U.S. subsidies. And so I think, obviously, his method and modus operandi is a bit uncouth, but it speaks to a further deterioration of relationships between Washington and the current, I think, outgoing soon Trudeau government.
I saw some extraordinary statistics, like 32% of all trade that Mexico does is with the United States. 22% of all trade Canada does is with the United States. We know that these things will hurt Canadians and Mexicans. Will they rebound and hurt Americans, though, Erol?
Well, it's an interesting concept. I mean, around 1.5%, if you broke it in half, there's maybe 2% of U.S. GDP goes to exports to Canada and Mexico. So really, you're talking about some very specific items. You might see an increase in avocados, for example, or you might see an increase in purchasing imported maple syrup. But for example, the United States is a domestic producer of almost all of these things, as well as energy. And energy is also in the tariff, but at a different percentage point, only at 10%. And so I think that the American consumer, this isn't really about trade. These tariffs aren't about trade, to keep in mind for your listeners. They're about stopping the fentanyl that's killing our kids. China supplies it, and Mexico smuggles it right in. China, which has been tariffed for this is all about the fentanyl, by the way, is the main producer of fentanyl chemical ingredients. They ship them to the Mexican drug cartels, and those cartels manufacture and smuggle it across the border. Over 100,000 Americans every year are dead from this. And the only way to get China to label fentanyl a controlled substance in 2018 was when Trump put those tariffs. When Mexico wasn't stopping the flow of migrants and drugs, Trump hit them with tariff threats, and they deployed 25,000 troops to the southern border. So without leverage, they have no reason to act. So these tariffs, once again, they're not about trade. They're about stopping fentanyl killing our kids. Trump has done it before, and he's going to do it again. And that's the core of this. It's not about economics as much as it is about national security.
He's also mentioned in dispatches, without actually saying I'm going to do the same thing, about the EU and about the UK. Could he produce tariffs for us?
With the UK, I really think it's unlikely. I mean, obviously, there's a disagreement between him and the current Keir Starmer-led government. But, I mean, a lot of things here that these tariffs are coming online for are, again, because of the fentanyl problem and the drug problem. Europe isn't shipping us drugs. So I mean, they're shipping us fantastic legal drugs, and that could be an issue for some U.S. consumers, especially Ozempic being, I think, made in Norway, of all things. So a lot of hot topic drugs. But I think that's a negotiation chip for Donald Trump when he's, again, trying to make sure everybody's paying their fair share to NATO, which the UK is doing. UK is a great partner. And I think, Donald Trump is, by definition, a fan of the special relationship. Does that extend to the rest of Europe? Will perhaps French companies be facing tariffs if they tariff American goods in retaliation? I think so. I think the goal, though, is to do what we did to the Japanese in the 70s and 80s. Some of your older listeners might remember. We put tariffs on Toyota, and we said, hey, look, you guys are flooding our market and you're killing our local competition. And what did Toyota do? They came to America, they opened factories, and now their cars are more American made than GM and Ford combined. Toyota is the most American company in America in the auto industry, outside of Tesla, actually. And so that's the goal for Donald Trump, to bring European companies to manufacture inside the U.S. As long as those promises can be made and agreements can be made, then these tariffs might never even go into effect when it's talking about Europe. When it comes to Canada, Mexico, China, that's the triad of fentanyl, and that's what we're focused on. So I think the UK is safe for now, and Europe is just going to have to negotiate its way through the art of the deal.
Thank you, Erol. Erol Morkoc, who's a Republican strategist and spokesperson for Republicans overseas UK. It's 18 minutes to 6.